The most common argument for the afterlife being outerversal is that it apparently has no concept of space or time, and also that it's purely a metaphysical realm that isn't physical. Both of these premises are extremely easy to disprove, however, because the afterlife has space, time, a physical location, a set size, as well as physical matter, and is bound by dimensions, so let's start over it point by point. We have countless references to space in the afterlife. Here are just a few examples. Snake, Waking, Kai's Planet, and Heaven all have set length, width, and diameter, which means that they have physical measurements which require space. Heaven is explicitly compared to a physical structure in size, and King Kai's planet is implied to be smaller than the Earth, and to have less energy than it. Goku and Vegeta also explicitly mention that there is space between them. Janemba warps space to create holes in the fabric of the afterlife. In Dragon Ball Heroes, the characters note that there is space-time in the afterlife, and that they make holes in it to make rifts. The afterlife is noted to have space like that of the living universe, and that it has a circumference, a physical measurement, in the Daizenshu. Goku moves in the afterlife, which requires space, since moving is the act of changing your position from one point of space to another. The Daizenshu mentions extra-dimensional space in the afterlife. King Kai's planet has gravity, which requires space and time. Now let's move on to some of the many references of time in the afterlife. Goku needs time to cross Snake Way. Goku also goes to train with King Kai for 5 months. Gregory moves at supersonic speeds, which requires time, and we also see King Kai measure their speed using a watch. Fusion time quite literally runs out multiple times in the afterlife, which requires time to pass, since fusion lasts 30 minutes. There is linear progression in the afterlife, and in a world with no time, everything will be at once and there won't be any change or linear progression. Let's note that earlier space-time exists in the afterlife. King Kai also directly states that time never runs out in the afterlife, which confirms that time does exist. It also has gravity, which requires time. Examples of the afterlife having a set physical location. It is stated that the afterlife is located millions of light years away from Earth. It's stated to be physically located above the mortal universe. It's stated that Whis needs 3 minutes to travel between Earth and King Kai's planet, while he needs over 2 hours to travel between a planet right outside of Universe 7, and over 30 minutes to travel between 2 planets in the same universe. Goku uses instant transmission to travel to the afterlife, despite it working by traveling through space. This is why it didn't work inside a black hole, and why it can be used to teleport inside completely separate dimensions. The afterlife falls inside space-time, given the fact that it exists within parallel quests, which are stated to exist within space-time. The afterlife is also created by time fragments, since it exists within parallel quests, which are created by time fragments. An example of the afterlife having a set size is that the Karshin realm is noted to be 10% of the combined size of the afterlife and the mortal universe's space. Examples of physical matter existing in the afterlife include Goku and others being able to enter it with their physical bodies and clothing. There is food and water in the afterlife, both being physical things. There are planets, a star, buildings, trees, and clouds in the afterlife. Again, all of these are physical things. Janemba is noted to have a physical body. Examples of the afterlife being bound by dimensions. The afterlife exists inside the macrocosm, which exists inside the neutral space, both being physical spaces. Time travel affects the afterlife and creates new afterlives when the timelines split. It is directly stated to be bound by dimensions by Kuyama if you believe that he is reliable. The afterlife exists within parallel quests, which are timelines created by time fragments. This quite literally means that the afterlife is not only physically contained within spatio-temporal dimensions, but also that time can literally create an entire afterlife, which the fanboys want us to believe is a metaphysical structure that contains no time and scales beyond it. So let's get over all the scans that people use to claim that the afterlife has no space or time. Number 1, Goku says that you don't have time in the afterlife, hence Super Saiyan 3 is easier to use there. Number 2, the CG talks about the same thing, mentioning that in the afterlife there isn't a concept of time, hence you can use Super Saiyan 3 better there. Therefore, the platonic concept of time does not exist in the afterlife. Number 3, the afterlife is spiritual and thus it should not be bound by the space and time of the living world. Number 4, Kuyama said it, which he didn't. Number 1 and 2, Goku is talking about lifespans and the time he had left on Earth, not that the afterlife has no time. Super Saiyan 3 uses too much energy and thus it shortens his lifespan, thus it's easier to use it in the afterlife where he is immortal. Since the data book is talking about the same thing and is specifically referring to this very statement, this means that the context is the same. There is absolutely no evidence that this statement refers to the platonic concept of time, as opposed to it simply referring to how from Goku's point of view time doesn't matter and loses its meaning. Since concept can definitionally just refer to somebody's idea of something, concept does not automatically entail a platonic existence. An example directly from another Dragon Ball guidebook is the hyperbolic time chamber statement, which says that time in the hyperbolic time chamber has a different concept because it passes faster. When you make concept art, you're not making platonic structures, you're simply making a prototype of an idea. So no, the mention of the word concept literally means nothing. Number 3, something being spiritual does not mean that it's not subject to space or time. Not all spiritual models are the same, and to assume that Dragon Ball follows a spiritual model where the spiritual is not bound by space or time is a baseless assumption. The afterlife, for example, is bound by space or time, as we've discussed previously. Even in Dragon Ball Super, Trunks doesn't believe in traditional ghosts, despite having died and having been to King Yama's place, and he claims those are not the same things. So this implies the spiritual in Dragon Ball is actually vastly different from the spiritual in tradition. This is seen in multiple instances, such as ghosts having late in Dragon Ball, ghosts being able to fall on the ground and take damage from it. We also see that ghosts in Dragon Ball don't drift off in space when they are on Earth despite them being stationary, which requires gravity to affect them and to keep them locked to the planet. The fact that they can be seen also requires photons to interact with them and bounce off them, further showing that the spiritual in Dragon Ball is subject to the physical even if not on the same level as humans. Number 4, the Kuyama statements that people nitpick are specifically not in reference to Dragon Ball, but about our world. Kuyama has talked on many instances that he doesn't know about Toriyama's world and that he is not reliable regarding it. Besides, that statement was a result of a bunch of subhumans harassing Kuyama until he was feeling unwell and literally begged them to stop. The person in question was clearly trying to tamper with Kuyama's statements as he kept asking the same question over and over again, and up until that point, and even after that, Kuyama was very clear that the afterlife is bound by dimensions, and that it's a dimensional construct, with a clear dimensional limit. So if you believe that Kuyama's view on our world somehow applies to Dragon Ball, good job, the afterlife isn't outerversal. Because if Kuyama says that the afterlife is bound by dimensions and has a dimensional limit a dozen different times, and the only example of him implying otherwise is after he was asked the same question over and over again, and immediately after he still went back to saying that afterlife is bound by dimensions, then we can assume reasonably that he simply slipped up or maybe got confused due to constantly being asked the same question over and over again. Now I will dedicate the rest of this video to debunking other awful arguments for the afterlife not having the concept of space or time. Argument number 1, but the space-time in the afterlife is fake and isn't real. Aside from such a thing never being said anywhere in the franchise and the fact that this argument is never getting past Occam's razor, what even would a fake space-time be? It's said to have space and time as well as size and location, not that it has some non-space, non-time thing that is just similar. Occam's razor requires us to take the statements as is. Argument number 2, but the space-time and distance in the afterlife are just metaphysical or abstract or not physical. Except metaphysical, space-time and distance cannot exist in the afterlife if there is no concept of space or time on a platonic level, since the concepts include the metaphysical and abstract. So even if it was referring to the metaphysical space and time, that alone debunks any argument that the concepts of space and time don't exist in the afterlife. Argument number 3, it doesn't have linear progression, size, distance, or physical object. This is just how it's shown for us, the viewers. It quite literally has all of them, since Goku narratively trains for 5 months and runs for 6 months. Goku narratively crosses 1 million kilometers. Goku narratively relies on a planet and trains under 10 times gravity. Goku is narratively late for the Saiyan fight. The afterlife narratively has a location at a set distance from the living universe. The afterlife narratively has space and time to be warped. The afterlife narratively contains Goku's physical body and other physical things. Argument number 4, but there is only progression in space in the afterlife because of plot. It would be boring otherwise. So what you're saying is that the plot and the narrative require it to have space and time. Thanks. It's always funny to me when people bring this up as if it counters anything, when in reality they're conceding that the plot debunks their nitpicked statements. Argument number 5, but you're appealing to reality. In the same way that trying to scale the afterlife to outerversal is an appeal to reality. Besides, this made of fallacy is the go-to if you have no debunks. We scale fiction using reality and using our own logic. Shouting appeal to reality debunks nothing. Argument number 6, fiction isn't consistent. Doesn't change the fact that the afterlife has space and time. Besides, this is a literal self-admission that the afterlife being outerversal is inconsistent. Argument number 7, but the afterlife is claimed to be metaphysical in the RPG guide. The RPG guide creators think that the Kaioshin realm is the living universe and that the living universe is hell. This proves that they are not knowledgeable on Dragon Ball's afterlife and that they have verifiably false idea about the afterlife and its relation to the universe. Therefore, it's fallacious to use them as a source on this matter. Besides, even by their own drawing, the living universe isn't much smaller than the afterlife, so there's that as well. Argument number 8, but by this logic, nothing in fiction is outerversal. That's not correct, since most outerversal verses don't get their scaling based on vague and subjecting no concept of space or time statements. And it's funny because these same Dragon Ball fanboys will always say that Dragon Ball solves every other verse, but as soon as their garbage outerversal scaling gets swapped up, they hide behind other verses as a shield and ask, but by this logic, this verse is also not outerversal. So here is your answer, fanboys. Genuine outerversal verses have genuine arguments to be placed that high. They don't rely on garbage arguments like yours. And whether other verses qualify for outerversal doesn't have anything to do with Dragon Ball to begin with, so stop ducking the actual topic with unrelated verses and address the actual points.